You're back on the record at 9:29 a.m.
Mr. Gillies, I'm going to hand you a document marked Exhibit 46.
Can I get a copy of that, Counsel?
Yeah.
Do you see that Exhibit 46 is a November 9th, 2012 memo from you to the file?
So just to clarify, I think you said November 9th, and this says November 19th. Is that correct?
My mistake,
Okay.
yes. Is this a November 19th, 2012 memo to the file?
Yes.
This is one that you filed.
Yes.
And does it describe a telephone call you had with the DEA?
Yes.
And I take it when you'd write a memo like this, you would try to make an accurate description of your conversations with a government official?
Yes.
Is that the case in this instance with Exhibit 46?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see there is a discussion, or you note that D.I. Hamilton wanted to discuss chargebacks and heat maps?
Yes.
What are heat maps?
So heat maps are maps that were prepared to show where products were being sold across the country.
And why was the DEA interested in heat maps?
Objection, foundation. Objection scope.
So this is the case that I just told you about. So I was explaining to them what information I had been looking at and we had been looking at Mallinckrodt, and they just wanted to understand what the data looked like.
And did you use heat maps as part of your investigation of this prescriber in Missouri that is described in Exhibit 46?
So not the prescriber, but the pharmacies.
And what did the heat maps show you?
So the heat map shows, again, as I just stated, where specific products that we were looking at were being sold across the country.
And how would that help you in these investigations of suspect prescribers?
Objection form.
So we would look at areas, we'd run chargeback data to see if we had any pharmacies that we should take a further look at. And in this case, identified some pharmacies that we believed we should take a...
So the heat map allowed you to identify pharmacies that then you should take a further look at with chargeback data?
So I'm sorry if I didn't say that clearly. So it identified areas that we could look at, and from there we went to the chargeback data to pull up pharmacies in those areas.
What's chargeback data?
So chargeback data, chargebacks is the agreement that we have with our customers, the distributors, where they sell product to their customers at some type of contract price. We sell them to them for another price, and if there's a difference, we permit the distributors to charge back that difference to us.
How much of, what percentage of Mallinckrodt's transactions are covered by chargeback data?
Objection form. I'm sorry. Yeah. Objection beyond the scope.
Not all. It doesn't apply to like chain pharmacies, is my understanding. And it applies to a large percentage of the other pharmacies.
So is it over 90% of the transactions that Mallinckrodt has are covered by chargeback data?
Objection, lack of foundation. Objection, scope.
That's my understanding.
Do you see that in your second paragraph, or I guess no, pardon me, in the fourth paragraph of your letter, you say, let me strike that, it's a memo, not a letter. Do you say, you write in your memorandum to the file, that's Exhibit 46, D.I. Hamilton was advised that Mallinckrodt utilizes $69,000 as an average annual sales of Oxy 30 and $75,000 as an average annual sales of hydrocodone by a pharmacy. D.I. Hamilton was informed that $69,000 came from statements by DEA officials as to average annual sales of Oxy 30 by pharmacies. Ryder advised that he could not recall where the $75,000 average came from. Do you see that?
Yes.
And is what this discussion was referring to is the total number of Oxy 30 sales that a pharmacy would have on average?
Objection, form.
Sorry, could you state that question
Well,
again?
is what this memorandum reflects is that Mallinckrodt understood that the average pharmacy should sell approximately 69,000 units of Oxy 30, oxycodone 30
Yeah.
milligram.
Not objection, form, foundation, scope.
So not should sell, but the DEA listed the number of products into a particular state, and my assumption was they took the number of pharmacies in that state, divided it, and came up with the average.
And the average was 69,000 for sales of oxycodone 30 milligram.
Objection.
For the time frame that the 69,000 was for.
And what about the 75,000? That was the average sales that Mallinckrodt expected of a pharmacy of hydrocodone during this period?
Objection, form, foundation, and scope.
No, again, that was an average, again, taken by the number of products going in this state by the pharmacies. This is what the average product sold per pharmacy would look like. So this is one data point that we picked up on. I think this information, if my memory serves me correct, might have been from 2008 or 2009. I know that the information was lagging by several years.
Do you know, when you're talking 75,000 as an average for sales of hydrocodone, do you know whether that was hydrocodone for all SKUs, all milligram levels, or one particular type?
Objection.
I do not know as I look at this.
Now, were these figures in this memo for average annual sales of oxy and hydrocodone figures that Mallinckrodt used with respect to all states?
Objection.
At this time frame, yes.
Now, did Mallinckrodt conduct chargeback review of every single order it received for opioids?
Objection. Form, foundation.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, when would Mallinckrodt conduct chargeback review?
So several different times. One, if there was a media article listing a particular pharmacy, we'd run chargebacks to see whether we had any of our product going into that pharmacy. If there was a, if the distributor wanted to discuss a particular pharmacy, we'd run chargebacks to see what the numbers were. And there might be another occasion. I'm just trying to think of what it is.
Would there be a level of high annual volume by a strike that? Would there be a level of high annual volume with respect to orders that would trigger chargeback review?
Objection. Form, foundation.
Yes.
And what level of volume would trigger chargeback review?
So
Objection. Form.
I'm going to have to break that down. One is we would look at the heat maps, look at the area where products were going into, and then we would run a list of chargebacks to look at the highest volume going into that area.
Was there a particular volume level that triggered a chargeback review for a given pharmacy?
Again, if we had a media article, we would do it on that. I don't, I'm uncertain about that.
Could a monthly order size trigger chargeback review?
Objection. Vague.
That's not my understanding.
Was there a particular record that Mallinckrodt kept whenever a chargeback review was done of a particular pharmacy?
Yes.
What kind of record?
So there would be a record of the report being run, and if we were going to further look at the pharmacies or several pharmacies that were on that list, then there'd be a record of discussions with the distributor.
Were there particular Mallinckrodt products that were monitored to determine whether a chargeback review would be conducted?
Objection. Form, foundation.
So my understanding is when we would look at chargebacks, we would look at oxycodone 30s, oxycodone 15s, and hydrocodone 10s.
So there are no other opioid products that Mallinckrodt sold that would be looked at for determining chargeback review?
Objection. Misstates his testimony.
So when we looked at chargebacks, the three that I listed were the ones that we looked at.
Could a mismatch between a pharmacy's orders and the population of the community in which the pharmacy operated generate a chargeback review?
Objection. Form.
I'm sorry, I don't even understand that question. So.
Sure. Was there ever an instance in which Mallinckrodt ordered a chargeback review of a pharmacy's orders based on the fact that the pharmacy was ordering an amount of opioids that seemed to be in excess of what a community of a particular population would need?
Objection. Form.
So I don't think it was based on population, but I know some of our reviews looked at population.
So the population served by the pharmacy was not a threshold basis for triggering chargeback review?
Objection form.
That's my understanding.
Hand me the next document. Here you go. Let's go. I'm going to hand you a document marked Exhibit 47. Do you see that?
I do.
And do you see that at the top, the document is marked Top 150 Pharmacies Oxy 30 milligram only, 2009 to 2011 data combined?
Yes.
Do you recognize this document?
I do not.
Do you know if this is a document that Mallinckrodt generated?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. Do you see at the bottom right-hand corner there's a number letter combination MNK-TNSTA 050980003?
Yes.
You ever heard the term Bates number?
Yes.
Okay, you see that's a Bates number at the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes.
If we talk about Bates numbers today, can we agree we're talking about these numbers at the bottom right-hand corner?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see that they end with a number sequence?
Yes.
So if we refer to Bates and we use the last 3 or 4 numbers, we'll know what page we're talking about. Fair?
Fair.
Okay. Turn to the page marked Bates 5452.
Okay.
Okay. Do you see there are a series of cells at the bottom of the page, 2010, 11, 2009, 2010, 2009 is how they're marked. And they're for food cities?
Okay.
Okay. And do you see that, for example, there's a marker listed with 210 and it's got a customer number 520443998?
Yes.
And do you see that that is listed as Food City in Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay, and do you see that there is a number for sales quantity of 295,900?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if this is a report that Mallinckrodt generated to show the amount of Oxy 30s sold by particular pharmacies across the country?
Objection. Lack of foundation. Objection. Mischaracterizes his testimony.
So I'm not familiar with this document. I'm not familiar whether Mallinckrodt prepared it.
Let me ask you, turning back to Exhibit 46, when you talk about in Exhibit 46 your memo to the file from November 19, 2012,
Yes.
being advised or advising D.I. Hamilton that Mallinckrodt utilizes a 69,000 as an average annual sales of Oxy 30.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about total sales or just sales of Mallinckrodt Oxy 30s?
This would be total sales, is my understanding, and it's the average, as I've stated.
Because there are a number. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Pardon me.
So again, 2009 to 2011. This is 2012. I'm not aware that we were aware during a 2009-2011 time frame that these numbers were out there in the internet. So.
And the question is, are there multiple manufacturers who manufacture Oxy 30?
Objection. Form. Objection scope.
That's my understanding.
So when, just to be clear what we're talking about, when Mallinckrodt is evaluating pharmacies based on average annual sales, you base it on how many Oxy 30s from any source is the manufacturer selling, is that correct?
Objection. Form. Foundation.
let me strike that and I'm going to ask a better question. The average of 69,000 is to be an average of all Oxy 30s by whatever manufacturer that the pharmacy is dispensing?
Objection.
That's my understanding.
Because what you're looking at is, okay, what's the average number of these pills that a pharmacy can be expected to sell?
Objection. Form scope.
So it is a data point. We had another number internally. This was an external number that I thought it would be good to apply when we're reviewing pharmacies.
Was there an internal number that was different from the 69,000 Oxy 30s?
Yes.
What was that number?
120.
120?
I'm sorry, 120,000.
And how did you use the 120,000 internal number?
Same way when we were reviewing pharmacies, we'd look at the pharmacies over 120,000 during the time frame of this document, 2009 to 2011. That's my understanding.
And then did you switch in 2012 to looking at the 69,000 number?
As an additional data point. So the number remained at 120. But if there was a reason to look at a particular pharmacy, we would actually drop down to this 69,000 number.
What would the 120,000 number be used for?
So when we pull the list of the pharmacies in a particular area we're looking at, we'd use that as the guide on the number of pharmacies above that line that we would look at. But there would be numbers, there would be pharmacies below that 120. And if there was a reason to look, we would drop it down to a 69.
So you would look during the 2012 timeframe at pharmacies that had 120,000 or more pills sold with respect to Oxy 30?
In my understanding, that was Mallinckrodt. The 120,000 was Mallinckrodt. The 69,000 was all. But I would still apply the 69,000 number if there was a reason to look further.
What was the threshold that Mallinckrodt used to trigger a further investigation to see whether a pharmacy was engaged in diversion?
Can I hear that right back?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Question, what was the threshold that Mallinckrodt used to trigger a further investigation to see whether a pharmacy was engaged in diversion?
Objection form, objection asked and answered.
So, again, we're not doing it strictly saying that there was diversion. We're looking at a pharmacy to see if there is anything that we should be concerned about.
Well, what threshold did you use to determine whether there was anything you should be concerned about with respect to a pharmacy?
So,
Objection form.
as I stated, the 120 would be the number internally.
Can you look at the Exhibit 46 that is your internal memo and tell me whether it reflects that you told the DEA about Mallinckrodt's internal 120,000 Oxy 30 threshold?
It's not listed here.
Okay, fair to say you didn't tell the DEA that Mallinckrodt had an internal Oxy 30 threshold of 120,000?
I don't recall whether I had discussed that with them or not.
Do you figure you'd have mentioned it in this memorandum if you had?
Objection.
I don't know.
Can you explain why the memo notes that you provided the DEA with a statement that Mallinckrodt utilizes 69,000 as an average annual sales of Oxy 30, but don't mention the fact that you had an internal threshold almost 2 times that high?
Objection form.
So in this situation, I was explaining to the DA how these pharmacies were selected.
But do you know why you didn't mention to the DEA that actually the Mallinckrodt number for looking at a pharmacy for suspicious distribution of opioids was not 69,000 but 120,000 Oxy 30 sales?
Objection form. Objection asked and answered.
No, because on the pharmacies that were selected, they were under 120,000. So I told them how we came about selecting those pharmacies.
Do you know if Mallinckrodt ever revealed to the DEA that its figure for Oxy 30 sales that it used to trigger a review of a pharmacy was 120,000?
I don't know whether we did or did not.
Do you know whether after November 2012 Mallinckrodt ever changed its understanding of the average annual sales of Oxy 30 that it expected to see at a pharmacy?
Objection form. Objection mischaracterizes the document. Objection lack of foundation.
So it's not our expectation, but again, it was an average. And did this average change? Yes.
When did it change? When did Mallinckrodt no longer understand that the average annual sales of Oxy 30 to be expected at a pharmacy was 69,000?
Objection form. Objection foundation.
Let me pull that question back and I'll give you a slightly different one. When was it that Mallinckrodt's understanding of the average annual sales of Oxy 30 became something other than 69,000 for a given pharmacy?
Whenever the DEA spoke at a conference where they provided the information.
And when did that happen?
Again, it did not happen routinely. So 2012 timeframe, again, as I stated, I think we were looking at 2008, 2009 numbers. As time went on, we were able to locate by searching the internet, reading through DEA training documents and stuff, where they were providing some additional data, and we were able to pull that information out. And again, as we move forward, 2013, 14, we're now looking at 2010 or 2011 information. And then in this situation, the DEA had done the calculation. Later, we had to do the calculation because all they did was give total numbers.
Well, for Mallinckrodt's purposes, when did Mallinckrodt's understanding of the average annual sales of Oxy become different than 69,000 for a given pharmacy?
Objection asked and answered.
When we were able to find the information out on the internet and we pulled it down, then it would change.
I guess what I'm getting is, what date did it change and what was the amount?
Yeah. So as I sit here now, I don't know what the amount was. And as I sit here now, I can't tell you what the date was, because we were always looking out there to see whether the DEA was providing this information, right? They had all the information. And this, for us, this would be useful, right? To have an understanding of if you're looking at an average, it doesn't mean that a pharmacy above this average is doing anything wrong, but it's it's a data point that we could use. So I thought it was important to have a basis of at least what the DEA was looking at, right? So they were not putting this information out annually, so it didn't come out annually. And, you know, occasionally you're searching the internet for DEA training. You're going through, you know, some of the presentations were hundreds of slides, and you'd go through and you'd go through and you'd find something and you'd pull it down from there. So at this time frame, they actually did the calculation and said that this is what the average pharmacy across the country sells. And again, it's an average. And later, those numbers changed.
And was the figure for the average annual sales for Oxy ever significantly lower that you remember than 69,000?
No, I don't think it was.
And back to the 120,000 internal figure, did you ever use a different number than 120,000 units of Oxy 30 as your triggering threshold for investigating pharmacies?
Objection form, objection mischaracterizes his testimony.
So has that 120,000 number changed? The answer is yes.
And can you tell me how that changed over time?
I believe, if my memory serves me right, it's either 80 or 85,000 now.
And when did it change from 120,000 to 85,000?
Within the past year.
So up until the past year, the threshold for determining whether to conduct a further inquiry into a pharmacy was 120,000 units of Oxy 30 in a year.
Objection form, foundation mischaracterizes his testimony.
Yeah. So that was our internal number, but we used other numbers if we had data points that we could use. So in this particular instance, we used that average, and we would look at this number or the other numbers that we had that the DEA said was the average, or if we could calculate an average to look at something different.
Yeah, an external number would be a number recognized by the DEA, for example, your number that you told the DEA in 2012 as demonstrated by your memo. Fair?
Objection.
Yes, this is a data point.
And the internal number for Mallinckrodt was 120,000 units of Oxy 30 through at least 2019. Fair?
Objection form.
Yes.
Let me hand you another document.
See the number on that?
It says 48.
Do you see you have in front of you a new document, and I believe it's Exhibit 47?
No, 48.
48. You have in front of you Exhibit 48. Do you see that?
I do.
And I'll object on the basis of the fact that this has been modified by counsel.
And can you look at it and tell me if you recognize this document?
So, it appears to be a chargeback report.
So this looks like a report from Mallinckrodt's system for review of chargeback data.
that's what it appears to be.
Okay. And do you see in the entry points at the very top an entry for Food City?
So it's the one on page 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Other Food City. Yeah, do you see you've got a whole series of pharmacies, and the very top is Food City on Chapman Highway?
Yes.
Okay. And if I look down this list, do I see a series of entries for pharmacies in Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay. And then does it show, the chargeback data show for each, for a series of periods, the amount of Oxy 30s that have been ordered by those pharmacies?
So I don't believe that's what this represents.
Okay.
So I want to
Show
make
me
sure
what-
that we're on the same page.
Do you see that? Is this just showing how many Oxy 30s were dispensed by these various pharmacies?
Again, as I said, I don't think that accurately represents what this document is.
Okay, what does it represent?
Well, according to the cover page on this, it says file name Oxy 15 and 30 shipped to and sold by. So I'm not sure if it's just 30 or if it's 15 and 30.
Okay, it says, if you look at the cover at the bottom, it says sheet Oxy 30. Do you see that?
Okay.
First of all, obviously you're looking at a document I've handed you. This does look like Mallinckrodt Chargeback report, is that fair?
Fair.
Okay, and so I'll represent to you that it's demonstrating Oxy 30 sales based on the front cover. Do you see that the way the report works, it shows orders over time and then has totals for 12 months?
I'll
Yeah.
object, hold on.
Sorry.
I'll object to the form of the question, and I'll object to the exhibit.
Do you see that?
Yes.
And do you see that for the top, do you see that there are multiple pharmacies here that have volumes of Oxy 30 prescriptions far in excess of the 69,000 figure that you outlined in your discussion with the DEA?
Objection.
Yes.
Did that trigger a review of these pharmacies or an investigation into potential diversion?
So I don't know which of these pharmacies on this list we specifically looked at.
But is it your testimony that because none of these pharmacies reached the 120,000 figure, that none of them had sufficient volume to trigger an investigation based on volume alone?
Objection form, objection mischaracterizes this.
Yeah, so that wasn't my testimony.
Okay.
We might have reviewed some of these pharmacies.
But would it have been based on something other than volume?
Objection.
Could have.
Well, you told the DEA that the number you look at for Oxy 30s at a pharmacy as the average number is 69,000 Oxy 30s a year. Fair?
No, that's not what I stated. So what I stated was that I told the DEA in that particular instance, that's the number I was using to look at these pharmacies.
Okay, and did you use that number to look at the pharmacies that are on Exhibit 48?
Again, I'm not sure which of these pharmacies we looked at, but it is a possibility.
But I take it you didn't, as a systematic matter, look at every pharmacy that had above average Oxy 30 sales based on the average you gave to the DEA?
Objection. lack of foundation. Objection mischaracterizes his testimony.
Correct.
Now, did you investigate Food City?
I believe we looked at several food cities.
Do you know what initiated that investigation?
In collaboration with the distributors, there would have been something that generated a review of the food cities.
What generated it?
I don't know as I sit here.
Let me hand you another document marked as Exhibit 49. Do you see that this is a document involving an email, starting with an email from Karen Harper to Bill Ratliff?
Yes.
And who is Karen Harper?
Karen's an employee of Mallinckrodt, worked in the DEA compliance.
And who is Bill Ratliff?
Bill Ratliff was my predecessor as head of security.
So you were not at Mallinckrodt in 2012?
I wasn't at Mallinckrodt in April of 2012,
When did you arrive at Mallinckrodt?
end of June 2012.
And why did Bill Ratliff leave Mallinckrodt?
Objection scope.
My understanding is he just retired.
With this document, do you see that Ms. Harper is responding to a report from Bill Ratliff sent in an email to her on April 27, 2012?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see he says, I spoke with Ed Hazuski, Director of Corporate Security, Amerisource Bergen, ABC, regarding Food City and specifically about the 3 DEA registrations listed below. He advised he is well aware of the 3 Food City pharmacies that are buying inordinate amounts of oxycodone 30 milligram tablets, and that he was in the 3 stores 2 weeks ago. Do you see that?
I do.
And so at this point in April of 2012, fair to say Mallinckrodt is on notice that the distributor, Amerisource Bergen, believes that you have 3 food cities in Knoxville, Tennessee area selling inordinate amounts of oxycodone 30 milligram tablets.
Objection form.
That's what it says.
Now, when a store is selling or a pharmacy is prescribing inordinate amounts of oxycodone, would you consider that a red flag for diversion?
Objection form.
So it would certainly be a data point that we'd want to look at.
What is a red flag for diversion?
Objection form.
So red flags are potential indications of diversion. Doesn't mean that there is diversion going on.
When you have a pharmacy that's buying inordinate amounts of oxycodone, is that an indication that diversion may be going on?
It could be.
What about, or do you see that Ed Hazuski told Bill Ratliff that, quote, the 3 pharmacies have 1 clinic, Bearden, that is driving the large numbers? Do you see that?
Where are you reading from? I'm sorry.
I'm reading from the second to last sentence in that paragraph.
Okay.
Do you see that statement?
I do.
So, Amerisource Bergen's Director of Corporate Security is advising Mallinckrodt here that the 3 Food City pharmacies have a clinic that drives their large numbers?
Objection.
That's what it says here, yes.
Okay. Do you know anything about the Bearden Clinic that's referred to in this email that's Exhibit 49?
Objection scope.
I can't recall where I read it, but I think I read something about Bearden.
Do you know if anyone at Mallinckrodt ever identified Bearden as a pill mill?
Objection beyond the scope.
I'm not aware of that.
Do you know whether Mallinckrodt ever reported Bearden to the DEA?
Objection beyond the scope.
I'm not aware of that.
Do you know if Mallinckrodt ever reported the Bearden Clinic to law enforcement?
I don't know whether they did or did not.
Do you know if anybody at Mallinckrodt took any action based on this report from Ed Hazuski, Director of Corporate Security for AmerisourceBergen, to investigate Bearden?
Objection beyond the scope.
For Mallinckrodt to investigate Bearden
Sure.
or someone else?
Based on this report, did Mallinckrodt take any steps with respect to the Bearden Clinic and potential diversion?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you see that Mr. Hazuski at AmerisourceBergen says, according to Mr. Ratliff, quote, "The problem, Ed explained, is the size of Food City as an ABC customer and the fact that this is only 3 of the Food City pharmacies." Do you see that?
That's what this says.
So fair to say that AmerisourceBergen's Director of Corporate Security said, you've got at least 3 Food City pharmacies selling inordinate amounts of oxycodone, but we're not going to do anything because they're a big customer.
Objection. Form, objection, scope.
So I don't know whether they are doing anything based on that comment or not.
Would you say the fact that you had one clinic driving the large numbers of prescribers, was that a red flag for diversion?
Objection.
It could be.
Do you see that Mr. Ratliff says, next paragraph, "At this point, I advised Ed that based on the unusually large orders of Oxy 30 milligram tablets, Mallinckrodt is considering putting them on a restricted chargeback list?"
Yes, I see that.
What's the restricted chargeback list?
So restricting chargebacks to the distributor.
And what does it mean to put someone on a restricted chargeback list?
As I explained earlier, the difference between the price that the distributor paid us and the contract price that the distributor sells to the downstream registrant, that difference will not be reimbursed to them.
So the point is, if you put someone on a restricted chargeback list, they don't get these payments back to balance out the pricing for the pharmaceuticals that are sold out of that pharmacy?
The distributor doesn't get that back.
And so that's a way of trying to regulate the sale of opioids at a particular pharmacy?
Objection form.
So the distributor could still sell to them, they're just not getting the reimbursement from us.
It creates a
The
financial
chargeback.
incentive for the distributor not to sell to the pharmacy. Is that fair?
If I understand that correctly, yes.
So, did Mallinckrodt ever put the Food City pharmacies on a restricted chargeback list?
I don't believe so.
Do you see that Mr. Ratliff says, "I explained the similarity of Food City and the Cardinal issue with CVS in Florida, and Ed advised that that had also been discussed internally"? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what he was referring to with the Cardinal issue with CVS in Florida?
Specifically, no.
Well, what issues did Cardinal the drug distributor have with CVS in Florida that you know of?
Objection beyond the scope.
So I believe that Cardinal had a distribution center that sent to CVS, and there was an issue with that. That's about the knowledge that I have.
I mean, did Cardinal get investigated by the Drug Enforcement Administration for distributing drugs improperly, opioids improperly, to CVS stores or CVS operations in Florida?
Yeah,
Objection scope.
I don't know that.
Okay, so do you have any idea what Mr. Ratliff was referring to when he's talking about the similarity between Food City and the Cardinal issue with CVS in Florida?
I do not.
As part of your work at Mallinckrodt, did you ever review this correspondence related to the Food City pharmacies in Knoxville that is here as Exhibit 49?
Can I hear that read back?
Sure. Question, as part of your work at Mallinckrodt, did you ever review this correspondence relating to the Food City pharmacies in Knoxville that is here as Exhibit 49?
So have I seen this document before? Yes.
When did you first become aware of it?
Not sure if it was a document I reviewed for the MDL or if it was a document that I reviewed for this deposition.
Did you review this document before this litigation occurred as part of an investigation of Mallinckrodt's relationship with Food City stores in Knoxville?
I don't think so.
Can you read the final paragraph of Mr. Ratliff's email starting with the words "based on" into the record?
Where it starts, based on?
Yes.
Okay. Based on what we know, based on what we now know, I see little exposure to Mallinckrodt/Covidian because of the smaller amounts of Oxy 30 milligrams that we are supplying. That being said, the similarity to the Cardinal CVS issue in Florida cannot be ignored. My recommendation is to bring this before the SOM committee to discuss. My personal opinion, put them on the restricted chargeback list.
And I think your testimony today is that Food City was never put on the restricted chargeback list. Fair?
That's my understanding.
And that's true for all 3 Food City stores that are discussed in this email?
That's my understanding.
And do you know why, if the chief security officer for Mallinckrodt had the personal opinion that these stores should be on the chargeback list, why they weren't put on the chargeback list?
Okay, can I read the rest of this document
Yes.
to see if there's something in here?
Can we have the question read back before he answers?
Okay, question. Do you know why the chief security officer for Mallinckrodt had the opinion that these stores should be on the chargeback list, that they wouldn't be on the chargeback list?
So this record is unclear why, and I'd have to speculate.
Fair to say Mallinckrodt was supplying opioids to Food City until just recently. Is that correct?
Objection, form, scope.
So I don't know if we stopped or not.
You just know they weren't put on the chargeback list, restricted
I-
chargeback list.
I don't believe they were chargeback restricted.
Now, do you see that Bill Ratliff was adding his email to an earlier email sent by Donald Lohman to Jennifer Buist and Bill Ratliff and Karen Harper on April 26, 2012? Do you see that?
I do.
Do you see that Donald Lohman mentions that ANDA was looking at becoming a secondary distributor to Food City?
Yes.
Okay, was Food City considering using 2 distributors? Was that a red flag for diversion?
Objection.
I mean, not necessarily.
Was that something that would be a potential indicator of diversion?
Objection.
Not necessarily.
But often is the use by a pharmacy of multiple distributors an indicator of diversion?
Not
You
necessarily.
say not necessarily, but sometimes it can be fair
Objection.
It's a data point
that you look at.
that you would want to look at.
Do you see then that, and by the way, who was Donald Lohman?
He was, at this time, our Associate General Counsel.
And do you see he lists a series of figures for Food City prescriptions filled? Do you see that?
Yeah, I'm reading to make sure I understand it. Okay, I see that.
And do you see that he notes that for oxycodone 30 milligram, the filled prescriptions amounted to approximately 800,000 per store?
I see that listed in here.
So that would be well over 10 times the 69,000 figure that you described in your memo regarding your conversations with the DEA. That's Exhibit 46, fair?
Objection, form.
So, again, in here, this is Exhibit 49, or do you want me to
Yes.
refer?
I'm just-
Oh, you
I'm
were
just-
just referring back to that from the number.
That's right.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow you.
No
Okay.
problem.
So I don't really understand these numbers that are listed here, but the 800,000 is higher than 69,000.
Yeah, I mean, 800,000 units of oxycodone 30 by a pharmacy. Would you say that's a red flag for diversion?
Objection, form.
So I'm just a little confused. Is the 800,000 per pharmacy? Is this the 800,000 for the 3 pharmacies? That's why I'm not understanding this
Well,
completely.
let me see, this might be helpful. Why don't you just read into the record?
Because the next one down says 269. So I'm just trying to make sure that you and I are on the same page as we're discussing these numbers.
Sure, I think this will become clear.
Okay.
Why don't you read into the record Donald Lohman's statements about these pharmacies, starting with the words, however, at the top of the page that's Bates number 7110. And just read through all 3 paragraphs about the total sales.
So just again, for a point of clarification, is Don listing what Mike Cochran from ANDA told him, or is this what Don is saying? I just want to be
All I can do is look at the
okay.
report.
I just want to make sure
No,
that
I understand. And if you could just read what the Associate General Counsel of Mallinckrodt wrote, starting with the word however.
Okay. However, when he reviewed their controlled substance order and report for a 30-day period for all stores, 3 noted above had some very high numbers. The annualized totals for all oxycodone SKUs, including Oxy APAP, was 4.1 million tablets, approximately 1.4 million per store. Okay. Of that, oxycodone 30 made up about 60%, or 2.4 million tablets, approximately 800,000 per store. The 30-day total for Oxy 15 and 30 milligram tablets was 269,000 tablets, annualized to 3.2 million total for these 3 stores.
So you're seeing here that the 269,000 figure is actually just a 30-day total of Oxy 15 and 30 milligram tablets.
Objection form.
You see that?
Objection form.
Yes.
And you see that for the annualized total for oxycodone 30, it's 800,000 per store. Do you see that?
I do.
And so, would you say that's a red flag for diversion, that the Food City stores in Knoxville on a per store basis are selling well over 10 times what the DEA says was the average, or what you told the DEA was the average oxycodone 30 sales per store?
Objection form.
So that is a high number that would require further review.
Well, can you tell me every step that Mallinckrodt took immediately after this series of April 2012 emails to investigate Food City stores in Knoxville?
Objection form. Objection scope.
So as I said, this document, the record's unclear what steps they took. I could speculate. In here it says that Food City told them that Matt Murphy from the Pharma Compliance Group conducts a quarterly audit of their stores, and Matt was a respected DEA executive who certainly knows his stuff.
But the point is, no action was taken with respect to Food City, right?
Objection form. Foundation.
So-
Scope. Mischaracterizes his testimony.
So I believe that some of the Food City stores were reviewed.
But the point is, not only did Mallinckrodt not report them to law enforcement or to the DEA, Mallinckrodt didn't even put them on the restricted chargeback list, right?
Objection form. Foundation assumes a fact, not evidence.
So they're high numbers. It doesn't mean that there was diversion going on, but I believe Mallinckrodt did a review of these stores.
Let me hand you exhibit.
Actually, before we move on, can we take a break?
Sure.
We're going off the record at 10:32 a.m. We are back on the record at 10:56 a.m.
Sir, I'd like to hand you exhibit 50. And do you recognize this document?
Yes,
And what is it?
it's a pharmacy information sheet
And where do pharmacy information sheets get generated?
from the distributors.
So this is a message from a distributor to Mallinckrodt?
Yeah, so I believe the form is something that we send to the distributor, and then the distributor completes it and sends it back.
Are these forms sent routinely, or is this because of a particular issue?
Routinely when we're reviewing pharmacies with the distributors.
And so was one of these sheets sent with a request that information be provided?
Yeah, so this particular Food City is being reviewed, so we're asking for the information from AmerisourceBergen.
And AmerisourceBergen, is that a distributor of pharmaceuticals?
It is,
And they were distributing to this Food City?
yes.
And that's the Food City at 7608 Mountain Grove Drive in Knoxville?
Yes.
So what they identify here is the percentage of controlled substances versus non-controlled substances. Do you see that?
Yes.
I say it's 48.9% controlled substances.
Yes.
Was that a red flag for diversion?
Objection form.
Not necessarily.
Could it be, having that large percentage of the business be controlled substances?
Objection form.
It could be.
What about the volume of controlled substances, tablets per month approximately? You see there's 184,505 tablets a month.
Yes.
Was that a red flag for diversion?
Not necessarily.
Could be.
Could be.
What about at the bottom, do you see there's a note that says, as of November 15th, 2012, ABC will no longer be servicing any Food City accounts. FC Buying Group, Topco leaving ABC may not be related to SOM, but could be. Do you see that?
I do.
So whose words are those? May not be related to SOM, but could be.
I don't know.
Is that something that Amerisource Bergen has written, or is that something that Mallinckrodt has written?
So I don't know who wrote it, but the information would have come from Amerisource Bergen.
An American source, Bergen, is saying, as of November 15th, 2012, we're no longer going to service Food City accounts. Is that right?
That's correct.
And they're saying we're no longer going to provide drugs, distribute drugs to Food City.
Objection form.
They say they'll no longer be servicing any Food City accounts.
Is a distributor's decision to cease providing drugs to a pharmacy a red flag for diversion?
No.
Objection.
It's not.
No.
The may not be related to SOM. SOM is a reference to suspicious order monitoring.
That's my understanding.
And you don't know who said the fact that Amerisource Bergen is parting ways with Food City may not be related to suspicious order monitoring, but could be. You don't know whose sentence that is?
I do not.
Do you know any steps that Mallinckrodt took to respond to this pharmacy information sheet that is Exhibit 50 to your deposition?
Objection form.
I do not.
Let me hand you another exhibit. I'd like to hand you Exhibit 51. Do you see that this is an email from Bill D. Gutierrez Mahoney to Jennifer Buist?
Yes.
Okay, who is Jennifer Buist?
She was an analyst in the DEA compliance.
At Mallinckrodt.
I'm sorry, at Mallinckrodt.
And Bill Mahoney works at McKesson.
Yes,
McKesson is a drug distributor.
they are.
They take drugs from Mallinckrodt and distribute them to places like, to pharmacies. Is that fair?
McKesson is our customer.
And they would acquire prescription opioids from Mallinckrodt, among other drugs, and then distribute them to pharmacies. Is that right? Okay. And do you see that Mr. Mahoney says on July 19th, 2013, we have suspended controls deliveries to this store effective 6/21?
Yes,
Okay. And do you see that Linda Martin sends Jennifer Buist an email that says, Jen, Food City pharmacies are Bill's. Do you see that?
yes,
And is he, Bill Mahoney, indicating to Mallinckrodt that McKesson has suspended delivery of controlled substances to Food City?
Objection, form foundation.
So what he says is we've suspended controls deliveries to this store.
And is suspended controls, is that a statement that indicates the suspension of delivery of controlled substances?
Objection, form foundation.
That's my understanding.
And do you know why McKesson in July 2013 suspended deliveries of controlled substances to a Food City?
Objection. It seems a fact, not evidence.
No, not as I'm sitting here right now.
Is the suspension of controlled substances to a pharmacy a red flag for diversion?
No.
Let me hand you another document. Do you see that the next document is another pharmacy information sheet?
Yes.
And do you see that it is sent by Bill Mahoney at McKesson?
Yes.
Give me that. And do you see that it is reporting with respect to a Food City pharmacy on Hardin Valley Road in Knoxville?
Yes.
Okay, do you see it reports that the percentage of controlled substances versus non-controlled at this pharmacy in July 2013 is 65%?
Yes.
Would you agree that's a red flag?
Not necessarily.
Could be.
Could be.
Do you see that the volume tablets by month for controlled substances is 96,000?
Yes.
And again,
Hold on. Where's that coming? Where's that noise?
Is it a phone or something?
Hello?
let's go off the record for a moment.
We're going off the record at 11:05.